Okay, it's making me film like this. I didn't know it would do that. Hello. I wanted to invite you guys to come live with me. I haven't ever done a live video, so we'll see how this goes, but I don't plan on doing a bunch of chatting back and forth or anything like that. But I have noticed a few kind of odd things that I just wanted to bring up with you guys. One is that I'm hearing from people that their subscriptions are weird. So if you would just check that for me, that's kind of one issue, is just verify that you're subscribed. The next thing is, would you check the Radium Girls video #1 for me? I had a reader reach out this afternoon and say that she just can't see it. And I've checked all my back materials and it says it's public, so I don't get that. So if you would just check that for me and let me know, like, can you see Radium Girls video #1? And if so, then, you know, I don't know, maybe something's odds going on with her device or whatever, but that's something I just have thought. It looks to me, based on my numbers, that I'm being shadow banned. And I suspect it's because of the election, that I've just started reading this book about Melania. And so I guess maybe it's brought up some shadow banning, but if you would just check those numbers for me, that would be awesome. I'm gonna adjust the video downward a little bit. I don't normally film at this orientation. And then just to chat before we get into the reading, I just wanted to tell you guys some fun things. One is that I just got back from a backpacking trip a couple days ago, and that was really fun. I wonder if any of you are into backpacking. We hiked Eagle Rock Loop in Arkansas. It's a 27-mile hike, and we did it in 40 hours, my daughter and I. So that was really fun. And then something that I'm having fun doing right now is just playing around with a website called 270 to Win. And you can kind of manipulate the different states to see, like with the Electoral College, what it would take for one candidate or another to win. And so that's just kind of fun. I just wanted to mention it to you guys. I teach government and economics to high schoolers. And that's something that we are doing together right now, is I've got an assignment for them that they have to play around with the map, print out a map, and then color their map, and before the election make an official prediction based on their own research. And then after the election, we'll look at the actuals and see how close we all got and all of that. But it's a really fun thing to get to do, and it only comes around once every 4 years. So I just thought I would throw it out to you guys as well, that's at 270towin.com. And that's just for the Electoral College map. So yeah, that's something kind of fun that I just wanted to share with you guys. But what I wanted to do tonight, I looked over on my shelf and I noticed that I had this book. It's called First Women, and it's written by Kate Anderson Brower. And it was written in 2016, and it's a look at all of the first ladies of America. And I might like to read it sometime. I haven't ever read it, but it takes different characteristics that the first ladies that they have, and that they have to have in order to kind of make it in the White House. And it compares different first ladies. So it's just an interesting book, but it looks specifically at the last 10 first ladies that we have. I'll just hold that up for a minute so y'all can see it. It goes from Michelle Obama back to Jacqueline Kennedy. And so it's evaluating their characteristics, what they brought to the White House, the various challenges that they faced, how they handled them, and that kind of thing. But because it was put out in 2016, I went in and looked just to see, and it does say something about Melania. And I know that since we're reading the book Melania by Melania, it's an autobiography, and of course it's just whatever she's telling us about herself. And so I thought it'd be kind of fun to just read through. She actually has a little afterword here in the end of her whole book, where she is kind of evaluating Melania. She is going off of what has been known and seen about Melania at that point, which was 2016. So this was Trump's first run for the White House. And it doesn't have a month, but it does sound to me like the afterword was very hastily added right after that 2016 election. So it's not as if it's a time when some of the Trump White House has already been in place. This was, I would suspect, put out sometime in November, December of 2016, but it's called Melania Trump and Her Place in History. So I just thought we could read some and talk about it and do that live. And I hope y'all will enjoy that. When Melania Trump was asked what kind of first lady she would be, she answered, "I would be very traditional, like Betty Ford or Jackie Kennedy. I would support him." And Kate Anderson Brower, who writes about the First Lady, she says, "It's been an incredible year to be studying the influence and impact of the president's spouse." And she makes the point that, like everyone else in the world, she had been engaged in the election season there in 2016, but that it was particularly interesting for her because she was writing this book about First Ladies, and one of the former First Ladies was running in that election. And then she says, and it was incredible to witness Donald Trump's victory, something that none of the polls and almost no one in the media had predicted. Once the nominees were announced, I subconsciously began comparing their spouses to the remarkably different women who have been First Lady. Would Melania Trump harness the star power of Jackie Kennedy? Would Bill Clinton take on any of the highly feminized First Lady duties, including running the White House residence? Or would he be more like his wife and take up an office in the West Wing? One thing has been clear during this presidential election, that the role was bound to change forever, either with Bill Clinton, who would become the first gentleman, or Melania Trump, who will be just as captivating. She says she personally was interested in seeing whether a man in the position would change the gendered expectations that define it. But in some ways, it would be just as compelling to see how Melania Trump handles the perilous assignment. It's kind of interesting that in 2024, we're in a very similar position where we have Doug Emhoff being the potential first gentleman, or Melania again. It's a very similar dynamic that she's describing. She says Melania may not be changing the gendered stereotypes most associated with First Ladies. In fact, I think she will embrace the most traditional expectations of the position, but she will redefine it in many other ways. She will be the first lady born outside the United States since Louisa Adams. This is one of the questions that we've had, so that's interesting. It says the wife of John Quincy Adams was the last one who had been born outside the U.S. And it notes that Louisa's father was an American, unlike Melania's parents, who are both Slovenian. And she says, although Pat Nixon and Betty Ford did some catalog modeling in their youth, Melania will be the first ex-supermodel to occupy the East Wing. This is another interesting note. It says she will also be the first third wife of a president. And then she notes Ronald Reagan is the only other president to have been divorced, and Nancy Reagan was his second wife. Melania had said that she wanted to follow in the footsteps of Betty Ford and Jackie Kennedy. But then she notes, judging by her public statements, she would be more traditional than any First Lady since Mamie Eisenhower. And then she goes on to tell us why Melania is a traditional First Lady. She says, Melania's mantra has been similar to Bess Truman, in that she says, I will support my man. Melania has described her marriage to Donald Trump as coming with, quote, a lot of responsibility. She lets Donald have his space. She's not needy or nagging. And it says that there's nothing conventional about Betty Ford or Jackie Kennedy. So she feels like there's nothing that Melania would have in common with Betty Ford, because Betty Ford was very outspoken and had striking honesty, revealing both her breast cancer diagnosis and her own addiction to pills and alcohol. So that's interesting. But she says there are similarities with Jackie. Certainly Melania's beauty, elegance, and interest in fashion would make her a natural successor to Jackie Kennedy. And then she says, like Jackie, Melania is a younger woman. Jackie was 12 years younger than Jack, which I don't actually remember us focusing on when we read Ask Not. So that's an interesting thing to note, is 12 years is quite a difference. And I know that used to be done more than it is now, but 12 years is still a big deal. Melania is 24 years younger than Donald Trump. It says, like Jackie, Melania fiercely guards her privacy and the privacy of the Trump's young son, 10-year-old Barron. So he was 10 when his father was first elected. And like Jackie, Melania is fluent in several languages. Oh, that's true. I hadn't made that connection. Had any of you? But it says, but unlike the other women I've studied, Melania is alienated from the close-knit circle of former first ladies because of the bitterness of the campaign, the sense of unspoken civility and sisterhood among them, and the empathy that most first ladies have for the candidate's spouse during the campaign, even when that spouse is married to someone from the opposing political party, was strikingly absent during this election. Yeah, it was kind of tough. During an interview on late night television show, then First Lady Michelle Obama said she had, quote, no sympathy for the opposing candidate's spouse on a campaign trail. And she apparently noted that because of some of the birtherism that went on about Barack Obama's birth certificate, that basically she kind of held Melania responsible for standing with him, and that if she didn't think that Barack would be a good president, she wouldn't stand with him. So it was wrong for Melania to stand with Trump, although she didn't name her by name. She just kind of implied who she was talking about. It says, Melania's life has been full of extremes. In many ways, her personal story is far more dramatic than that of most first ladies. Long before her $1 million wedding, where she wore a $100,000 Christian Dior gown, and well before she moved into a 3-story penthouse in Trump Tower, Melania Navs lived in a small factory town called Sevnija, which was then part of a communist Yugoslavia and is now part of Slovenia. Communist dictator Josip Tito was president when Melania was born in 1970. She grew up in a nondescript concrete apartment building, and a childhood friend recalled how she and Melania would send messages to each other attached on woolen strings strung up between their apartment balconies. That's interesting. Melania's mother worked as a pattern maker for a children's clothing manufacturer. In fact, on my most recent video, I had somebody be like, oh, her mom wasn't a fashion designer. She was just a seamstress. This indicates a pattern maker, which makes sense, which is a designer, right? So let's give honor where honor is due. I think it's kind of low and rude of us to downplay someone's hard work just because they were poor in another country and now their daughter's husband has politics we may or may not like. I just think let's honor someone who did hard work, right? She was a pattern maker for a children's clothing manufacturer, and her father was employed as an auto mechanic and a car parts salesman and was a member of the local Communist Party. Oh, this was interesting. You might want to go back if you're interested in that question at all. There was a little discussion about how much the Communist Party did or didn't play a role in their lives in Yugoslavia at that time. And so if you're interested in that question, you may want to go back to the comments section on that last video about Melania. I believe it's Melania part 3, I guess. Because some people were saying, oh yeah, the whole reason she got ahead was because her father was in the Communist Party, and it just wasn't fair, and other people wouldn't have had the opportunities that she had. And then other people who, one commenter actually had lived in Slovenia, is Slovenian, and that person said actually almost everybody was a member, and it wouldn't have provided him any additional, kind of perks that other people wouldn't have gotten, because almost everybody was a party member. So that wasn't some sort of like elite set apart mode where he got special protection. I don't know. Might be interesting. If that's interesting to you, go back and check it out. It says, described as sweet and shy by her friends, it seems incredible. And if you've just joined us, we're reading from this book here. It's from 2016. It was a woman who studied First Ladies, giving us a look at her assessment of what Melania would be like as she looked ahead before Trump was actually in office. Described as sweet and shy by her friends, it seems incredible to think that she would ever get to this point. Her path to meeting billionaire real estate tycoon Donald Trump began at 16, when she was spotted on the street by a photographer and embarked on a modeling career. She changed her name to Melania Naus, so her initial spelling had Melania with a J instead of just an IA at the end, and Navs, like with a V, instead of Naus with a U. So she just changed it for her modeling career when she started working in Italy. She headed to New York in 1996 to pursue her modeling career, and Paolo Zampoli, head of a modeling agency, introduced Melania to Trump at a 1998 party, which we're going to talk about in our next chapter. That's chapter 4 for us. But that man, Paolo Zampoli, called her stable and focused, which goes along with what we were just talking about in that last episode of how she did seem very determined, she talked about it herself, about how she was very disciplined, very serious, very single-minded. And so, yeah, it says, Melania is married to a man who has very traditional expectations for women. In a 2005 interview with Howard Stern, before the birth of their son, Trump said, "I'll supply funds and she'll take care of the kids." Years later, he told Stern, "Melania is a wonderful mother. She takes care of the baby and I pay all the costs." For her part, Melania seems to enjoy this arrangement. It says, unlike Jackie Kennedy, who relied heavily on Nanny Maud Shaw to take care of their children, Melania insists that while she has a chef and an assistant, Barron does not have a nanny. She put it this way: "My hands are full with my two boys, my big boy and my little boy." She sometimes calls Barron Little Donald, and she says that, like his father, Barron prefers suits and is not a sweatpants child. So that's interesting. I mean, that's kind of like saying, "Oh, my baby prefers, Converse." It's like, well, your baby prefers that because you give them the options they're given, right? Like, her baby preferred suits because she put suits on him, not because he surveyed his options and went to all the toddler stores and made his best decision. But it says another one of Melania's firsts is being the first lady to have ever posed nude. In a controversial photo shoot in 2000, Melania posed naked on the cover of British GQ, wearing handcuffs and sprawled on a bearskin rug aboard her then boyfriend Donald Trump's Boeing 727. The photo spread was used against Trump. And I will just say about that I have always thought it's weird that anybody would want their significant other to have inappropriate pictures taken or revealing pictures taken that would be available to the world in any way. I think that's really inherently disrespectful, and that might just be, I'm sure it is from my Christian worldview. But I also just think some things are private between two people, and I think it's inherently disrespectful for a man to encourage his wife or girlfriend to display herself in ways that market her like an object, right? That inherently, to me, goes against the very bonds of relationship that ought to tie you together. So to me, that's really weird. And even if you take out moral obligation, it's wouldn't you want to keep something beautiful and special for yourself instead of having her displayed like that on your plane? It just seems really showy and creepy to me. Anyway, if you've just come in, we're reading from this book. It makes sense then that Melania has gone out of her way to stress her role as a mother in an effort to make herself less of a sex object and more relatable to women voters. They kind of make some speculation about, she makes some speculation about what Melania's First Lady initiative would have been, but she really has no idea, so I'm not going to bother you with that part. Again, I think all this came out before they ever entered the White House, so there's just some speculation, but some of it is taking her good expertise on the issues of First Lady and applying it, and that's what I'm trying to share with y'all. Judging by her long absences from the campaign trail, she most ceded the spotlight to her stepdaughter Ivanka. Melania will be a very private First Lady. I think that's true. It says, while she prioritizes motherhood, Following in the footsteps of her predecessor, Michelle Obama, Melania does not seem to share the same sensibility that Michelle has about being a mother. Although Michelle spoke often of putting their daughters first, she also privately expressed her frustration at having to give up her lucrative career in Chicago to be the First Lady. It seems unlikely that Melania resents putting her career on hold while she raises their son. She has worked outside the home, but she's always made it clear that her work was not her primary passion. Barron is the same age as Malia Obama when her father became president, and Melania will devote herself to getting Barron settled into his new life, as Michelle did with her 2 daughters. It says, in the White House, I thought this was interesting. In the White House, Michelle was very concerned with making sure their daughters were not too spoiled by the residence staff. She insisted that they make their own beds and go to the kitchen themselves if they wanted something to eat. Yeah, don't text it or ring a bell. You're not a British lord or lady. Keeping Barron grounded will be a constant challenge for Melania because White House butlers and maids will do anything for the first family. She says, underneath Melania's devotion to her husband, I suspect she shares an underlying feeling with the other first ladies. I think this is really an interesting observation. A sense of sometimes being subservient to and imprisoned by their husband's overwhelming ambitions. In an interview with the Washington Post last April, Donald Trump described deliberations with his wife ahead of the announcement. Melania pleaded with him, "We have such a great life. Why do you want to do this?" He told her, "I sort of have to do it, I think. I really have to do it. I could do such a great job." Donald Trump's combative political style has sometimes posed personal problems for Melania. A well-connected Republican who spoke on the condition of anonymity told me that it has cost the Trumps friendships. The CEO of Macy's and his wife stopped being their friends. That's the only one they mention, actually. The only one she mentions. It says the source tells her, the Trumps have let politics get in the way of friendship. I actually don't know anyone who is a true friend to them anymore. And I think that's sad. Maybe they just weren't people that had dear friendships before all of this. And maybe that's hard no matter what when you have their level of success. I don't really know. But I think to let politics override deep and abiding friendship is sad. And I realize that we're in a society now that does that a lot, but I think the care that we have for one another ought to extend to where we can talk about hard things together, or then agree not to talk about them for a while if it's too intense, right? It says the divisiveness led to riots, and it points out, which I had kind of forgotten, so this was a really good reminder, that President Obama invited the Trumps to visit the White House much earlier than other presidents had invited the president-elect and his family to come and visit. And he did so intentionally to try to calm all of the riots and anger. And so that was really good for President Obama to have done. It says, it talks about Melania's potential embarrassment. And it says this, even when a shocking and deeply embarrassing tape surfaced, revealing extremely lewd comments Trump made about women in 2005, including his bragging about groping women and his failed attempt at seducing a television host, Melania stood by him. I believe my husband, she said in an interview with CNN days after the story broke. Quote, this was all organized from the opposition. And with the details, did they ever check the background of these women? They don't have any facts. End quote. And it says, it was impossible not to draw the parallel to Hillary Clinton's 1992 60 Minutes interview, in which she was asked about her husband's relationship with Jennifer Flowers. If you guys remember this, it is, when you go back and listen, you will hear Hillary Clinton with a totally different accent. She says, you know, I'm not just sitting here, some little woman standing by my man like Tammy Wynette. I'm sitting here because I love him and I respect him and I honor what he's been through and what we've been through together. She totally said that. And she sounded like the biggest hick when she said it. And so I had never really connected Melania's support of Donald with Hillary's support of Bill, but this expert who studies first ladies did. And I think it's apt. I think that's really a valid comparison. As first lady, that detachment might help shield Melania from the blowback that presidents inevitably get. A woman who worked for Pat Nixon, Betty Ford, and Barbara Bush says that she remembers that Barbara Bush would tune out whatever was said about her husband when the headlines became too negative. And that Nixon's White House aides would even not deliver newspapers in the final days because it was just making his wife so sick. It says Melania seems to already possess that habit of self-preservation. Though Melania will be charting her own course as First Lady, she will face the same challenges as the women who came before, clinging to a sense of privacy while living her life on the world's most public stage. She has a hard edge to her and has not engaged in her own defense in a way that other First Ladies. Oh, and she has engaged in her own defense in a way that other First Ladies have not. They point out, which I had not remembered this, and maybe the book that we're getting into will go into this, but you guys can tell me in the comments if you knew about this. It says she filed a libel suit claiming $150 million in damages against a blogger and the Daily Mail for reports that wrongly suggested that she had been an escort. Did you guys know that? It says the Daily Mail retracted the story. I had actually heard like a little whisper of this, that when some people accused it, that there's no proof has been found, but I didn't realize that there had been a libel suit. So that's pretty interesting. It says before her husband announced he was running for president, she had some lighthearted tweets that she ended up like deleting because they were like, bye, I'm off to my hashtag summer residence, hashtag countryside, hashtag weekend. And so the campaign understandably wanted to tamp down the image of a wealthy woman on her way to one of many homes for her vacation. Although, the author points out, Jackie Kennedy was similarly criticized for being out of touch, specifically for spending too much on clothes. So that's interesting. I think it's really good that this author seems to seek to draw connections wherever they exist and not get sucked into party lines, if that makes sense. She seems to be able to connect Melania with Hillary, Melania with Jackie, and not be unable to do so simply because of politics and having an angle. And it says the most damaging moment for Melania came during the RNC when she cribbed part of her speech from Michelle Obama's 2008 DNC address. Eventually, a Trump organization staffer publicly apologized for that and took the blame for borrowing from Michelle's remarks, but the damage was done. It says in the months after the convention, Melania became even more reclusive, and Michelle Obama kind of made some comments about it, and they never really connected. Like they took just a few photos together, but never really, she never made any efforts with Melania, apparently. There was, I guess, bad blood between them. Like most First Ladies, if Melania disagrees with her husband, no one would ever know it. I mean, a lot of the First Ladies, actually, I heard recently that every First Lady since Roe v. Wade has been pro-choice. Did you guys know that? I didn't know that. So all of them that had pro-life husbands, which would be Reagan, Bush, Bush 2, and then claiming Trump, although he never claimed to be pro-life before he was president. And I don't know that he ever really did. I think he just said like he would act like a pro-life president. But all of them disagreed with their husbands. So that was interesting. It says a former staffer to George W. Bush said that Melania reminds her of Nancy Reagan, that both fiercely defended their husbands during periods of incredible unpopularity. And also like Nancy, Melania has built a wall around herself that can make her seem cold and removed. Nancy, however, was much more controlling of her husband's image. And unlike Melania, who says she has privately asked Trump to tone down some of his charge language, Nancy very publicly inserted herself into her husband's work. Aside from litigation, It says that it's hard to imagine Melania getting involved in her husband's personnel decisions. I chose not to go into politics and policy, she said. Those policies are my husband's job. So she doesn't seem to want to engage at all in the area of politics and doesn't want to be part of the story. And I think that's true. People comment all the time about how she doesn't even want him to win. She's not a part of the campaign. And she has been here and there, but she very much does prefer to stay out of it. And actually, did you guys happen to catch her section? Last night, Trump had a rally in Madison Square Garden, and Melania had a section where she gave a little talk and actually talked a little bit about New York City and about it being kind of like the jewel of the creative and cultural global world, essentially. And I was struck by her accent, y'all, and the way that she does have difficulty with pronunciation. And that's not me being ugly. That's me in the vein of all the books we've been reading, just that she really is, English is not her native language, and it's very obvious. And so it makes sense that she's not out there just speaking and saying it, because she gets criticized when she does it, and she's probably not very comfortable. And then I don't think she has the desire. So anyway, but she does occasionally, like last night. It says, it's been awkward to watch at times as Donald Trump has railed against illegal immigration, putting Melania as an immigrant herself in the difficult position of defending her husband's controversial stance. Melania said that as she has been at all times in full compliance with immigration laws, and when asked about her own views on immigration, she has defended her husband, but not stridently. She said, you follow the rules, you follow the law. She is an enigma. It is impossible to know what she really thinks, and that is exactly as she and her husband want it. Then it tells us about the chief usher who runs the White House and manages it, and that the usher's job inside the White House is to learn the dislikes and likes of each person who resides there, even down to their favorite brand of deodorant and shampoo. Isn't that interesting? So that they can stock up and make sure that they are provided for in the White House. And so she tells, and this makes sense since she is kind of the expert on first families and first ladies. It says, Melania will work with the chief usher to run the private quarters of the White House, where the first family resides on the second and third floors. And I just thought this was interesting. I hope y'all find it interesting too. It talks about what happens behind the scenes when a new first family comes to the White House. So listen to this. It says, Melania and her staff will be given binders, including a layout of the White House, a list of staff with their photographs so that you could get familiar with the people who live there, and what changes are allowed to be made to the Oval Office. Every president and first lady may redecorate their own private living space on the second and third floors, including their living room, bedroom, study, bathrooms, sitting room, kitchen, and children's quarters. Typically, the first family has used the help of an interior designer to redecorate these rooms and the Oval Office, but there are limits to what they can change. Structural changes to the mansion and work done in the historic areas on the second and third floor, like the yellow oval room and the Lincoln and Queen's bedroom, must be approved by the Committee of the Preservation of the White House, etc. So that's interesting, I thought, of how they go about those changes. And it does sound rather expensive, doesn't it? I'm guessing we, the American people, pay for all of those, redecorating changes. I hope they don't do too much. That sounds really expensive to be redecorating every 4 years, doesn't it? A former staffer who spoke on the condition of anonymity, because this sounds like the royal family. It says, because of the sensitivity of the matter, current resident staffers are not supposed to talk to reporters, and former staffers are discouraged from doing so. That sounded like, have you seen the Housekeeper's Diary or the Royal Service books where they, it's staffers, but they're not supposed to do that if they've served the royal family. So this sounds kind of like that to me. This staffer told her, as far as I'm concerned, if asked, I would not go back to the White House for Trump, even if they tripled my own pay. And then we get a little quote from the top pastry chef at the White House saying that he thought Donald Trump would be entirely different from any president that he has ever served, and that he would be nervous. He said that the kitchen might be totally different under Trump. And I don't know if that turned out to be true or not. It says, one thing is very clear. The Trumps will certainly be more comfortable being waited on than the Obamas ever were. And that's the end of her Afterword. Like I said, this book is all about the first ladies from Jackie Kennedy to Michelle Obama. But then when I went to look, I realized that it did have that little section about Melania. And so I just wanted to share it with you guys. I thought it'd be fun to talk about. So the other thing that I have going on right here on my desk is I've got my magazines and newspaper for the next Vintage Variety Hour. What I try to do is kind of pre-select those and put my little post-it notes in place so that I can access those easily when I'm recording that. And then the other thing going on is that I'm just procrastinating. I should be grading some papers for my government economics class that I teach, and instead I decided to go live with all of you because I'm a really excellent procrastinator. What about you guys? Well, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed that little look, and maybe sometime we can look at some of these stories. I did kind of peek through it. I found it the other day, maybe a month ago or something, and I like it because it groups the stories about the first ladies not according to the woman, but according to the issue. So like it talks about motherhood in the White House. It talks about East Wing versus West Wing, so differing factions within the White House. It talks about bad blood, just very interesting. So yeah, just wanted to share that with you guys, kind of just float that as something that we could talk about and add it as a little bonus content to our Melania discussion. I thought it might balance out Melania's stories about herself to instead give us what a First Lady expert had to say about it. So I think I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I see you guys there in the comments, and I'm so glad that you've been here with me, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you missed the first part, go back and listen because we did talk about some things. And also be sure to check those subscriptions and check that Radium Girls 1 video for me, because somebody was saying that they couldn't even see it. And I do fear that I'm kind of being shadow banned. So hopefully not. Hopefully we're just going to go on having a wonderful time together. But if you would check those things for me and let me know, and like always, like, share, subscribe, anything you actually do like. I only ask for that if you genuinely like it. We'll talk to you guys later. Bye.